Hey guys, William here, aka Big Bastard. In this video I'm going to do two things. I'm going to give you a little more background on to why I'm reading Pride and Prejudice. Well, actually I've just finished Pride and Prejudice at the moment. And something that's related to Pride and Prejudice that I think inherently I knew about before, but it was just in the research I was doing, it was just so in your face that it just kind of really triggered me, and we'll have fun discussing that. You will be seeing a lot of this video, I'm just going to tell you up front, will be me going through a script, showing certain examples and telling you about it. So the majority of what you'll be seeing throughout this video will be the actual web page, but I'll do the picture-in-picture with this window, and that's gonna be the video. So the reason I started doing reading Pride and Prejudice, now I had always meant to read Pride and Prejudice anyway, but the one time, and the reason I'd started to read it, not because I had any overwhelming interest in it, but it's just one of those perennial classics. There we go again, perennial classic. One of those perennial classics that you're not a reader if you haven't read it, let's be honest. And the particular novel's genre interests, the story elements that focus on, none of that's in my bag. I don't do romance genres. To me it's just basically another Harlequin, so I don't end up pretty much having anything to do with it. And I ended up starting to read Pride and Prejudice at this time, because that's what I told myself, you have to read it. Is classics, and you really need to verse yourself in the classics, or else you just don't call yourself a reader. That's the way I feel about it. I'm sorry. People who subsist solely off of, actually I won't say I'm sorry because I'm not, people who actually subsist solely off of contemporary literature, that's, first of all, most of the shit being put out today is not literature. Let's be upfront about that. They're hash grinding out slop, and somehow it gets the designation of literature. So a good example is E.L. James' 50 Shades of Shit. 50 Shades of Grey. This, I had in my one, when I was doing Scribophile, where you could earn karma and they would critique your work. I had a bunch of romance friends on there, and they were mocking and bashing 50 Shades of Shit because it was so poorly written. It's none of it adheres, and most books today, none of them adhere to proper literary techniques that we are told excuse me, we are told when we go to first publish our books, that you have to do this or you ain't gonna get published. And that's what's being pushed out and pushed out and pushed out now. Either because someone has a good name, or because they had an idea that they had enough backing to be able to get some momentum behind it, and then it just took off for whatever reason, like E.L. James's 50 Shades. And it's not, nobody's adhering to, and this is why Stephen King actually, I believe, took, he didn't take a shot, but he did the most credibility he could give E.L. James when asked about what he thought about her novel, was that she wrote really good sex scenes. So what does that tell you? Stephen King is a master of literature. He, not only was he, from my understanding, not only is he a best-selling author, but when he started, he was an English teacher. So you got all this going on, and then there's people that when you go to throw a classic at them, they're like, no man, I don't want to read it, it's so boring. So with Pride and Prejudice being one of those, almost the most talked about classical work with alongside very few others, I knew I had to check it out. So I started reading it, and I got about 3 pages in. I was like, oh damn, I like the way she writes, this is really good stuff. Because her sarcastic wit and the bite that she brought to her work really drew me in. It's the type of work I could appreciate. And I ended up, I don't remember why, but I ended up getting interrupted with something else. And a lot of people are going to call me out on this because, like, if I get interrupted in a book and I go back to read a book and maybe there's a series that I hadn't caught up on and I just got a new book and I'll go reread the series. Well, I did that with Game of Thrones. Now, a lot of people are probably shaking their heads saying, well, you just bashed anyone that reads contemporary literature and it snubs the classics. Okay, you got 2 differences here. Number 1, I don't read just contemporary literature. Number 2, I don't snub the classics. I don't sit there and say they're boring. I don't say, oh man, what drag this is. So there's these differences. Yes, I did sideline Pride and Prejudice when I could have gone back to it for Game of Thrones, or more properly for the literary buffs, the Song of Fire and Ice saga, because Game of Thrones is the first book, but somehow because of the HBO series, which is the only reason people even think about Game of Thrones or know about it, is what, that's you ask the majority of Game of Thrones fans, and particularly the really tweeny acting ones, the ones that just act like tweens around a rock star, around Justin Bieber. Okay, Justin Bieber being called a rock star was probably a bit of a stretch, but you get what I'm saying. And they will be like, no, why would I do that? I watched the movie, or I watched the series. I don't need no stinking book. Well, let me tell you something, okay? The series of books, there are significant differences in those books, many of which are better than what's in the series, and I will give it to the series. In a lot of ways, it does trump the books in certain aspects, in certain key areas. But aside the fact that the series actually gives you an ending, even though it pissed people off, it didn't piss me off, but I'm not going to go into that right now. This is about Pride and Prejudice, not Game of Thrones. So, you're missing a lot if you don't read the book. Now, and I'll give Martin credit, okay? More often than not, if you have a movie adaptation of something, then you just say, oh, well, the book, and I think even people who haven't read the book go to default, well, the book was better, I think a lot of people actually say that without having read the book if they just don't like the movie. Well, in Martin's case, he was actually heavily involved. He was the executive producer of Game of Thrones, and so he was able to keep most of his creative ideas intact there. The only problem is he was also, in his younger days, had worked on the TV series Beauty and the Beast, if anyone even remembers that. Starred Linda Hamilton and other people. I only remember the Linda Hamilton thing just because I was a Terminator fan, but I wouldn't touch Beauty and the Beast. I was just like... But, yes, I know, speaking of snubbing classics, but you gotta remember, if you snub a television production of a classic, you're not actually snubbing the classic, because the television productions are worse. Anyhow, unfortunately, I think this got Martin into the idea that sex sells, and then Game of Thrones ended up just becoming a pornographic serial, basically, and that's pretty much what sold people, sadly. The quality of the writing, the great characterization, no. No, you talking to people about what their most favorite Game of Thrones moment was, and then like, man, that sex scene between. And okay, I'm being harsh. There are a lot of people that tell you, oh, it was this part with Jon Snow, or it was this or that. But even that's based on sex appeal. Anything where everybody was into Jon Snow was based on sex appeal, just because of the fucking actor Kit Harington. So you got all this going. Let me put it this way: you'd be like, oh, are you hot for Kit Harington? No, but if you hear someone talk about the actor as much or more than their character, they ain't in the and this a lot of this is what I'm saying may not even seem significant to the Pride and Prejudice conversation, but believe me, it's all significant. It will tie in. But if you hear people talk about the actor as much as the character, they ain't in it for the character. They ain't in it for the literary value. They ain't in it for any redeeming. If it's a series that has no literary basis, they're not in it for the redeeming qualities of characterization, plot, pacing, any of that. That's nothing to them. They just want their freaking eye candy, okay? And that's another thing that pisses me off. Because people are so shallow and vapid today that we're not producing any great works anymore. Look at freaking Disney, okay? They're just rehashing series. Well-loved series. Everything's a rehash. Most anything Hollywood puts out is a rehash. There's no original, innovative, or cutting edge. You don't got the Quentin Tarantinos. You don't got the Kubricks. This is all. It's blasé now. It's just, oh, let's buy the next big property and let's milk it to death. That's all it is. It's horseshit. It really is horseshit. Because to lack that kind of originality in Hollywood, I would say it would be the death of Hollywood. 20 years ago, it had been the death of Hollywood. But the fact that people become so shallow and vapid, Hollywood ain't gonna die anytime soon just because of that alone. It really pisses me off. But done running Game of Thrones correlations, going back to my Pride and Prejudice conversation. So I sidelined Pride and Prejudice for the longest time. Well, my sister had been recently looking at doing a Pride and Prejudice derivative work. And she's the type that's going to be very dedicated to the world of Pride and Prejudice, dedicated to Austen's intentions with the characters, dedicated to the characterization, because she really loves the work. And I try to help her because, I'm the resident author, even though nobody really... Yeah, I'm not going to go on. Okay, so I'll leave it in the link, but basically I wrote a novel called Bloodlords, and you can check it out on Kindle. The only time it got any momentum was when it was given away for free. It didn't help that the first review was a negative review from another author that I got in a fight with on a forum, on a Facebook forum, because, okay, so just a quick aside, that Facebook has these groups, these literature groups, where you can plug your work. They have specific rules on how it should be plugged, but they don't tell you if the conversation, if your work isn't relevant to the conversation, don't plug it. So you have a bunch of assholes going through these threads and just spamming their works, which really pissed me off. Got a fight with another author about it, and he promised me that he was convinced that I wrote horribly, and he promised me he was going to leave a bad review, and he did. Now, his review wasn't completely meritless in some of the things he said. Some of the things he attacked, though, were things I had done deliberately. Now, if that doesn't work for you, fine. That's your cup of tea. You're not going to like every book or every work, particularly when someone tries to do something that may not be particularly popular at the moment. But there were other things he was attacking me on that were not legitimate. And that was the crux of the review. The majority of the review was non-legitimate attacks he was making and trying to sink my work. Now, I did get my payback because I went to his book and I actually read the first chapter, and the first chapter told me everything I needed to know. It was horrible. And me, I just carried out a skillfully constructed literary beatdown on this guy, and then went on about, you know, my thing with Bloodlords. I tried giving away for free. That's when the sales spiked, but no one would leave comments. No one really interacted with the work, and I have no means to publicize it. I don't have monetary revenue enough to do an ad campaign or anything like that. So part of it's on me. It was probably horribly executed. But, you know, if you feel like it, go check the book out, see what you think. Surprisingly, with this one guy that was attacking me, he did have one point of merit. But he mentioned it in an argument with me later, it was nowhere near the review. And I'm like, oh, you're full of shit. And then I went and I checked it, and before I said anything, and then I'm like, oh, he actually caught a good deal there, you know, a good gaffe that I did. And I corrected it, and I'm like, dude, these are the things you should have mentioned in the review. But anyway, so me and my sister have talked much about this work she wants to do, and I try to help her. And then I was so irritated about all the derivative Pride and Prejudice works that are horrible. I just threw some canned idea out there, just joking around. And my sister was like, wow, that's a really good idea. And I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, this is a good idea. So I decided to go with that, and in due course of research, because I'm not going to be like a lot of these Austenites writing these books that go and they watch the BBC movie with Colin Farrell, and they're like, series with Colin Farrell, and they're like, oh my god, I know everything Pride and Prejudice, I'm a true Austenite. No, you're not. And these kind of people really piss me off. But I'm not like that. So I want to get into the world. I want to understand the characters, just like my sister did. I want to understand everything about that period enough to write a credible work. And that is why I started off reading Pride and Prejudice, and now have finished it as of last night. And I didn't finish a Pride and Prejudice novel. I finished the annotated Pride and Prejudice, which I showed you before. Try this again without the camera blipping. That's 700 odd pages. This wasn't the version I finished, though. I finished the Kindle version. Do that version that I just showed you, because the paperback. Because the Kindle version is most of what that is, because it is from the same, it's basically the same work. But the Kindle version really skimped on the art in that. I don't know if they were trying to make the ebook more succinct or what, but they succeeded. Another thing that I had a problem with was the annotations were not on the same page as the material. And I know a lot of people don't like it that way, but I do, so I can reference what, for a first read through. I'm glad I did the Kindle, because for a first read through I'd rather focus on the story, but eventually I like to have the annotations on the page so that I can reference back and forth. And the Kindle didn't help, the Kindle version didn't help, because the linking was horrible. When you have a footnote linked, you should be able to link back and forth between the footnote and the material. But got through that, still planning and executing the work. Right now I'm reading Jane Austen's England, which is a book that tells you about the England Jane Austen lived in. That's just to so you get your transition there. That was the first part of the video. Now we're going to the second part where I actually show you what basically ticked me off on going into some of the research on this. And I'm going to minimize. I'm not sure how small I should go. We'll go that. Minimize so you can see my desktop. And we'll start actually journeying through these horrible works. Now look, here's a search for Pride and Prejudice on Scribd. And again, if you don't have it, I recommend you get Scribd. It's $8.99 a month, and you get access to a ton of literature that, no, they don't have everything, but they do have quite a bit. So just a base search, Pride and Prejudice, on Scribd, and you look at all the shit you get in this base search with Scribd. Yeah, I mean, you can generally tell by the cover of a work that is going to be one of those smut novels. And you can see there's a lot of smut novels on. I have no idea what the Dark Tower 4 is doing in there, but okay. But yeah, you can see there's a lot of these smut novels. I'm pretty sure that is, but I won't rule that as of yet. This definitely is. Well, anything by P.O. Dixon is. And you can see there are some derivative works that might be non-smutty, but there's quite a few. Just if you go through a simple perusal, there again, P.O. Dixon, seeing that there is so many smut novels of Pride and Prejudice by people claiming to be Austenites, and it's appalling. It's disgusting. It's everything Austen would have nothing to do with. And we're actually going to look at some of these and give you an idea of why they are hideous. So here you have Pride and Prejudice, a novel of Mr. Darcy, Elizabeth Bennet, and their other loves. Here you see a quote, audacious and masterful, true to Austen's spirit, which you already know is bullshit, because if it's true to Austen's spirit, it's not going to be a smut novel. Anne Herodine has given us a compelling and sexual novel of manners. That is a complete oxymoron. Okay, that's just totally stupid. You can't have a sexual novel of manners. Anne Herodine's Pride and Prejudice, well, unless you have a book about manners while you're having proper manners while you're having sex, but that's kind of pointless. Anne Herodine's Pride and Prejudice, a novel of Mr. Darcy, Elizabeth Bennet, and their other loves, revisits the classic Jane Austen work to fill in the gaps that the original left unexplained and unexplored. Ingenious, brazen, and unrelentingly entertaining, yet always appreciative and respectful of the tone of one of the world's most beloved literary works. Yeah, I'm calling bullshit right there. Because if you're writing a horror novel, is not respectful of Jane Austen's works. This masterful reinvention by the acclaimed author of Lydia and the Brotherhood of Philander, that's a completely stupid name, is truly a Pride and Prejudice for the 21st century. You know, the last line is probably accurate, which kind of pisses me off also. It probably truly is a Pride and Prejudice for the 21st century, which shows how low we have humanity has sunk into the cesspool of bullshit. And this isn't me being a purist, a Puritan or anything. You know, obviously, if you watch my videos, you know I'm not a Puritan. Far from it. But I'm saying when you take something like a Jane Austen's, it's literally the rape of Jane Austen, is what it is. When you sit there and you take these works and you drag them through the mud and then you proclaim that to be the best we have for Jane Austen in the 21st century, I'm telling you, man, she's literally doing 360s in her grave, just spinning around. So, moving on. Darcy's Feast, a Pride and Prejudice intimate variation, Mr. Darcy's Lessons number 1. Elizabeth Bennet and Fitzwilliam Darcy have finally given in to their passion and announced their engagement. That part is fairly accurate because that's how it went in the book. Lizzie noticed... Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking another book. Okay, yeah, well, they did give in to their passion and announced their engagement, but they ain't given in to their passion in the way that we think of today. Lizzie notices a peculiar thrill every time she sees Mr. Darcy, but has no idea what he's ready to teach her. A simple picnic lunch turns into a feast for the senses. A short, sensual variation on Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. This loving and steamy Pride and Prejudice intimate variation novella is best read by those who are 18 plus. You know, thanks for the warning, but really, as if the cover didn't tip us off. And I am going to say that while one could make the argument that obviously Elizabeth and Darcy would end up having intimate relations after their marriage, they would by no means do so before their marriage, which is what this seems to indicate. Because there's no indication in there that the marriage has occurred. Look at this, 26 pages. What the hell? This also tells you how ignorant these people are writing these, that they can't even fill out a complete novel. These are fan fictions. These are ridiculously absurd fan fictions. And I will be getting to the source of why that happened, why these fan fictions are so prevalent shortly, but let's continue on looking at some other examples. Wasn't this the same? No, different author. Mr. Darcy's Passion, Essential Pride and Prejudice Compromise, Pemberley Intimate number 1. 33 pages. Are you shitting me? 33 pages. Essential Pride and Prejudice Compromise. When Elizabeth Bennet does Derbyshire with her aunt and Uncle Gardiner, they make a plan to visit Pemberley. Fairly accurate. Initially worried that she will bump into Mr. Darcy, Elizabeth is reassured when she's informed he won't be arriving until the next day. Those of us who actually read the novel know what's going to happen next. But when she strolls in the woods alone, that didn't happen. So she was in the woods with the gardeners. But when she strolls in the woods alone, she comes face to face with him. Okay. Barring the fact that she wasn't alone, this is fairly accurate in the sense that her and the gardeners were strolling the paths of Pemberley, and Darcy just comes out totally unannounced on the day that he was not supposed to be there. Passion burns in Darcy's veins. He determined to show Elizabeth just how much he ardently admires and loves her. That actually is accurate, because if you read the characterization of Darcy toward the end, you can actually see that he really is very passionate and full of ardor for Elizabeth. He does really love her. But, he's still a gentleman, so that's the one thing these stupid books seem to keep overlooking. Will their passionate interlude in the woods lead to something more? Will this be the only opportunity Elizabeth has to feel his strong arms around her and to experience his lips on hers? Yeah, that's where nothing happens. This is a short novelette of 8,000 words. I'm not even sure that's a novelette, but I haven't checked word counts. Oh, I'm thinking novella. Still, 8,000 words, that's pretty much fan fiction. Moving on, Pride and Prejudice, the Wild and Wanton edition. Oh, 599 pages. Well, finally, at least someone can fill a book. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of good fortune must be in want of a wife in bed. This is another thing I hate. That sentence has been so canned and distributed. It's almost like a standard part and parcel of any derivative Pride and Prejudice work. They think that they are. They think that they get to claim the title of Jane Austen by starting off with one of her most singularly memorable quotes. And, of course, they obviously added to that. Unfortunately, we've never been able to see Elizabeth and Fitzwilliam in flagrante delicto until now. In this deliciously naughty update in the beloved classic, you can peek behind the closed doors of Pemberley's sexiest master bedroom and revel in the sexual delights of your favorite couple. From first kiss to orgasmic finish, this book is every Austen fan's dream come true. The story you love with the heat turned up too high. No, that's not a real Austen fan. I'm sorry. I could tell you what that is, but I'll try to keep it civil for now. But basically, I'm pretty sure you figured my thoughts on what that is by now. Any Austen fan that claims that Austen isn't Austen without sex, that should tell you something about the so-called Austen fan. Definitely not an Austenite. It will come as no surprise that the dashing Mr. Darcy is as passionate and intense with his knickers off as he is with them on, and admit it, we've all wanted to see him sans knickers. Yeah, the only reason you're saying that, and I'll get into this later, is this freaking stupid. It literally, it all has to do with the BBC movie. I'm not saying the BBC movie is stupid. I'm saying that for some reason everyone decided that because Colin Firth played Mr. Darcy, that made it all, that was absolutely Pride and Prejudice, that there was no other Pride and Prejudice, that the BBC version was the first existing work of Pride and Prejudice. That's how these idiots acknowledge this, they're like, book? What book? Oh, did Jane Austen actually adapt from the movie? They're that stupid. Okay, that's actually me being very, very pissed off and angry, yeah, you got it. Moving on. My Alpha, Mr. Darcy, a dark Pride and Prejudice variation. Mr. Darcy is a liar because he says that he's an Alpha. I am an Omega, and I belong to him body and soul. Once upon a time, Elizabeth Bennet read a fairy tale that broke the world into three kinds of people. The normal everyday betas, the proud and arrogant Alphas, and the meek, submissive Omegas whose only goal in life was to please their growling Alpha mates. Lizzie never forgot that tale, even though it wasn't real, or was it? Okay, so this is probably some sort of werewolf thing. I can tell you they already have 131 pages. I can already tell you they have pack hierarchy totally misunderstood. For one, there's no betas. And I understand they're probably trying to create a world where this wolf hierarchy exists and is somehow relevant. The other thing they got wrong is that, first of all, Omegas aren't just basically the female breeding partners of alphas, so that's nowhere. First of all, to get you to understand how the wolf hierarchies work, alphas mate with alphas. Now, alphas will mate with omegas. It's one of the things where they consider all the females in the pack theirs, but generally omegas, whether female or male, are shunned and pushed out, and if the alpha male is not pushing the omega female out, then the the alpha female definitely is, because she doesn't want the competition. So this is clearly off on one of those veins, and they show that they don't even understand something so basic and inherently simple as pack hierarchy in Wolf Clan. So you've gotten to see a few of these. I'm not going to go over the rest. Just rest assured that we're actually going to sit here and discuss the issue. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm coming down hard on every derivative Pride and Prejudice work. There are works that actually are good or decent, and they have to do with either alternate storylines that could have happened, or there's some other take on it. Or I'm not even against things like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. So when I first heard of that, I was very angry that I didn't think of it, because that was totally my cup of tea. But, and you'll see that if you choose to read Bloodlords. But the point is I'm not against some sort of variation. The thing is, I think you need to be true to the author's works. You don't necessarily have to be a purist to do this. So for example, I was talking to my sister and I gave her an example. I said, because I was angry because one of these books it was set in modern day, and it had Darcy as a judge and Elizabeth as a attorney. And he ticked her off in the first chapter, and in the next chapter, the first thing you see her do is go into an elevator, hit the button really hard and angrily, and say, fucking Judge Darcy. And that is not something Elizabeth would do. Not necessarily because a modern version of Elizabeth would not curse. I mean, there's no way around it. She was about propriety. This was what set her and Jane apart from Lydia and Kitty. So you can't get around that. So that's already botched in that regard. Number two, she didn't give overt expression to her anger. She did get angry, but she was prim, she was proper, she kept it contained. If anything, she might let it out in a bit of biting wit, as her father tended to do. So you can see already how the characterization has been raped here, just totally shattered from the perspective of what you would expect from Jane Austen, based on just simple premises of characterization, staying true to the material. It's like Lord of the Rings, okay? The movie adaptation by Peter Jackson. That was a great movie. Was it just like Lord of the Rings in the books? No. But Peter Jackson kept true to the characterization and what the characters would do, and therefore kept true to the spirit of the work. If you don't keep true to the spirit of the work, then you need to just retire the license you have for that work, or if it's public domain, you need to just retire the idea and not do it, because it doesn't become a derivative work. It becomes a new work where you've stolen characters and situations from someone else's work because you were too lazy to do your own work. That's all it is. And a lot of this, I told you I would get back to the roots of the problem with these so-called Austenites, that they're not Jane Austen fans, they've never read the book. What's happened is, when BBC brought out the movie with Colin Firth, these are people who before, if you gave them a Jane Austen novel, they'd throw it in the trash. But because the movie came out with Colin Firth, then all of a sudden, all these women are like, oh my god, Pride and Prejudice, man, you've got to see this movie. And so they watch the movie, and then they think that they're Jane Austen experts because they saw a movie. They won't read the book. They're incapable of reading. I'm going to be blunt. As we've seen from these short, I can't even call it proper novelizations, we've seen from these short fan fictions that the majority of these they can't even intelligibly construct a novel together. So you certainly, if they don't have the wherewithal to write out a full novel, you know they don't have the wherewithal to read a classic work like Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. So what they're doing is they're taking notes from their movie with their hero, and I say their hero, Mr. Darcy, but it's really Colin Firth. And this is insane, because all they really want to do, you saw that remark about Mr. Darcy, we've all wanted to see him drop his knickers. No, what you want is you want to see Colin Firth drop his knickers. Okay, that's the problem. That's the problem we're facing with this whole, this blowing up insanity of what I call the rape of Jane Austen. That's all it is you had a movie, Game of Thrones. This is what I was talking about with Game of Thrones. The average Game of Thrones fan of the movie or the series has not actually picked up or even looked at the book. And this all goes to this degradation of society that I was talking about earlier. We are just literally a society that if you can't put it on flash drive, if you can't short bite it, however, this is why we went to Twitter. This what I call fast food society. You want it now, and you want it concisely. And it's done nothing for literature. Fact is, at the rate we're going, I would say easily, in 1 to 2 decades, we will have lost our ability to produce literature of any meaningful content or quality. Because that and Kindle has made any hack, and I know this sounds harsh because I published Bloodlords on Kindle. I went through the traditional publishing model, and they just didn't want to deal with it, I think because it's a vampire novel. But effectively I resort to publishing on Kindle. And so it might sound unfair for me to call that out, because that indicates that I'm one of those hacks. And you can say that, you can make that argument. I can tell you how much time I put in Bloodlords. It's a novel I've worked on for 20 years. That's irrelevant. You can make your own impression on what a hypocrite or a bigot I am, but I'm just going to say it. The advent of Kindle has made it possible for any Tom, Dick, and Harry to just vomit word salad out there and actually get people. And that's what I gotta say. The production of this shit isn't what's pissing me off. The reception of it is what's pissing me off. It's almost like how we got Trump elected. It's just freaking insane that you could do that. It's almost like people are just losing their minds. They don't want anything to do with any type of coherent, cognizant effort of mentality. They want everything abbreviated. They want it Cliff Notes. That's what they want. They want Cliff Notes of everything. And then they sit there, and this is even worse. The more Cliff Notes they read, the more they value their knowledge, as established. It's like, did you read a book? No. Where'd you learn it? Off of YouTube. Okay. I'm like waiting for a punchline here. And so this is a problem that's plaguing the world at large right now, but particularly is plaguing the literature of Jane Austen. It has these shitty derivative works keep pouring out. It's like this just being vomited all over the literary landscape, what literary landscape we have left. And it's being precipitated even more by idiots like Yale James, who wrote a Twilight fan fiction. This again goes to the point I'm making. She supposedly was so enamored with Twilight that she wrote fan fiction of it, and it became 50 Shades of Grey. Now, considering that Twilight was meant to be a moral lesson on virginity, what does this tell you about the way people think and interpret literary works today? And I'm not a Twilight fan, by no means, but I will say that Stephanie L. Meyer is a good writer. I think I got the name right there, but she is a good writer. Okay, I've read Twilight. I'm not a huge fan of first-person narrative. This is another thing that really ticks me off. You see how we're coming into so much first-person narrative that third-person narrative is point of view is actually going to be extinct in less than 5 years, is my guess at this point. So, I mean, what we got left? You know? Now, there are people who do first-person narrative really good. Jim Butcher's one of them. Love Jim Butcher's works. And there are others who do first-person narrative really good, but I just overall cannot stand first-person narrative. For a lot of reasons, both as a writer and as a reader. Because as a writer, as a reader, yes, you know, the idea is that you feel more involved in the work, you feel more associated with the work as if you were the character, and you can imagine yourself in that situation better, but you also strip away the person's ability to imagine and conceive possibilities, because literally with a first-person novel, the only information you're getting is the only information the character herself can get. So, not only this is part of the reason why I hate as a writer, because it makes it complicated trying to deliver information to the reader in a way that is not contrived or just really ill-structured. Because it will become apparent that the only person who can actually convey any information to the reader is the protagonist, and that's it. You don't got any other. Everything has to go through the protagonist. So whereas in a novel with third-person POV, okay, you can account for things otherwise. Everything has to come directly to the protagonist in a first-person work, and it is hard, you know. And I say it's hard to write, but don't think because you see a person who's written a first-person perspective novel that they worked that hard to achieve that. There are a lot of authors running a lot of cheap outs to basically convey information in a forced or an unnatural way to the reader. And before closing off, I know that one could say that's a problem with Jane Austen because she does do that, but you got to remember the literary format of her time was much different. This is why she does not consider first-person POV, or I'm not first-person, third-person POV. She does not consider the perspective. So, for example, if you have something that might be said looked at from Elizabeth's point of view, then you jump to Darcy's point of view without even any indication of break or anything, which you do not do that today. That's something that existed in her time. The literature was early, and it would soon, through the 1800s, starting with the early, I would say the early 20th century, starting to format into what we realize now. During the 18th and 19th century, there wasn't that structured format that we have now for how you should compose a novel to make it accessible to the reader. Of course, you know, we probably won't have that in 5 years at the rate everything's going, but that's just my take on it. So, this is my video on explain to you why I was reading Pride and Prejudice at the moment, explain to you what's irritating the hell out of me at present about these derivative works, what I call the rape of Jane Austen. And that's it for this video. I'll be hopefully bringing content out more regularly to you guys. I have a lot planned. I'm not going to mention it because every time I mention what I have planned, then shit hits the fan with my plans. So just hope you'll hang around and hopefully be surprised by what I have to offer. So this is, for now, Big Bastard, and I'm signing out.